What is neutrality in the face of horror and aggression?
In discussions among friends who study the renewed teaching of the truth, the topic of neutrality repeatedly arises. Is it the same as positive neutral thinking? There is often a struggle to understand what exactly is meant by it. Meanwhile, in some circles of humane thinkers, it is common to assume that it means that no appraisal should be made at all regarding a world issue, and one should just not have a view at all, and should not engage in case one feeds the trouble by acknowledging it. But how can that be constructive neutrality and fairness? Because, with such a stance, neutral positive actions, that is to say, acts of Gewaltsame Gewaltlosigkeit, are not supported. Instead, the good values with their corresponding actions are neglected along with the bad. As clarification of how neutrality is seen by Billy, I include a quote from a recent conversation the 28th of February 2023 between him and Ptah, which does not state that there should be no thoughts about who is in the right and who is in the wrong, but that neutrality is required for such an assessment.
Also in everyday life, neutrality is often discussed, regarding how the human being must conduct himself or herself neutrally in many situations. For example, when something is to be assessed, which allows no possibility other than just being neutral. This is especially the case with any arbitration where being neutral is absolutely imperative. Consequently, everything in this form must be impartially handled and dealt with. To assess or even decide a matter of who is right and who is not, with the help of being neutral, requires an absolute neutrality which in no form allows a partisanship. With that, all moments must be correctly assessed and all participants equally treated, whereby sympathy or antipathy, friendship or animosity and so forth must absolutely not be relevant. Pater 6. Auch im alltäglichen Leben wird oft von der Neutralität gesprochen, wie der Mensch sich in vielen bestimmten Situationen neutral verhalten muss, wie Z. B. Wenn etwas zu beurteilen ist, was keine andere Möglichkeit als eben das Neutralsein zulässt. Das ist besonders bei irgendeiner Schiedsrichtung der Fall, da das Neutralsein absolut zwingend ist, folglich alles in dieser Weise unparteiisch zu handhaben und zu behandeln sein muss. Mit Hilfe des Neutralseins eine Sache zu beurteilen oder gar zu entscheiden, wer Recht hat und wer nicht, das bedarf einer absoluten Neutralität, die keinerlei Weise eine Parteilichkeit zulässt. Dabei müssen auch alle Momente richtig beurteilt und alle Beteiligten gleicherweise behandelt werden, wobei Sympathie oder Antipathie, Freundschaft oder Feindschaft und so weiter absolut nicht relevant sein dürfen. B. 6.
Not providing weapons for another country's war is a clear, neutral action. Also, not providing verbal ammunition to fuel an irrational dispute between neighbors is also an action. In each case, it can powerfully contribute to the heat dissipating. In the same conversation, Billy says,
Any who believe this, that weapons should be given to Zelensky to create peace, are not only partisan and of bean-straw-like low intelligentum, rather they are removed from reality without compare, and also they are so sick in the head that they cannot recognize that weapons only spread death and ruin, continue to incite unpeace and make war, as they also endanger their own country and their own people. That has been proven now by the governors of 141 countries, who, in a partisan form, have decided to condemn Russia, have put Zelensky, who has succumbed to war delusion, high in the heavens, and do not recognize America's hegemony delusion. Ban. 4-5. Jene, die dies glauben, sind nicht nur parteiisch und bohnenstrohdumm, sondern wirklichkeitsfremd sondergleichen, zudem derart krank im Kopf, dass sie nicht erkennen können, dass Waffen nur Tod und Verderben verbreiten, weiterhin Unfrieden schüren und Krieg schaffen, wie sie auch das eigene Land und das eigene Volk gefährden. Das haben jetzt die Regierenden von 141 Ländern bewiesen, die parteiisch die Verurteilung Russlands beschlossen haben, den vom Kriegswahn befallenen Zelensky in den Himmel hochheben und Amerikas Hegemoniewahn nicht erkennen.
Offering goods and shelter to people displaced by an act of despotic aggression is surely another example of neutral positive action, because it is the recognition that, whoever they are, they require the basics of life to preserve their dignity as human beings. In the worldview of Billy and the Plejarans, even serious criminals must be given the basics of life, or the possibility to obtain them rightfully. Would a truly neutral person, one who sees things as they really are, refuse to help? Neutrality, as Billy describes it, is seeing things as they are without prejudice and bias, and without taking sides, whereby taking sides would mean that one was not considering all the various facts of the matter independent of the actors. Clearly, Billy does offer his view of this or that political situation, and why, though necessarily without hypocrisy or being partisan. In Billy's book, Sinnvolles, Würdevolles, Wertvolles, that which is sensible, dignified, valueful, in an article called And May There Be Peace on Earth. Und es sei Frieden auf Erden, pa. 114. He goes on to discuss how one should act when carrying out a necessary defense as a leader of a people or during some conflict with another individual. He explains that such a leader, for instance, when he or she has no choice but to carry out a defense action using the same weapons in order to protect lives and the homeland which is being attacked, knows to keep the upper hand over the attacking opponent in every human-worthy form. He notably does not say that one should not maintain the upper hand. He explains that such a person, however, does not hold on to any feelings of avidity, revenge, or hatred, and remains free of Raserei frenzy fury, grim fierceness wrath, Leidenschaft passion zeal, Berserker Wut berserk rage, and Verbissenheit doggedness grimness, among other things. And he or she does not celebrate an ensuing victory. She keeps a cool head. So on one hand, we need to be aware that being neutral does not mean being disengaged. But it does mean that actions taken must be done so while maintaining a neutral frame of mind which simply attends to the facts of the matter. Isn't it the case that those of us who think we promote the idea of peace often feel that calmness and mildness are appropriate when dealing with difficult situations and conflict? However, if the wrongs committed are quite extreme, we feel justified in a bit of fierceness, rage, and grimness, a righteous indignation, perhaps. We declare this is outrageous. Well, I know I have done that and have had cause to think long and hard about it. Seemingly what is important is that the actions, including any necessarily loud growling, come from a calm, level-headed place, and are thus logical and based on a clear appraisal of reality. Outrage often seems to arise not only from mindless hypocrisy, but also from a degree of shock that such an extreme occurrence could manifest. But true neutrality should logically lead us to a more informed position regarding cause and effect and prevent such degrees of unawareness. The mindlessness of belief can lead us to directly or indirectly being the cause of both mild and severe injustice and other harm. One person might be too soft, and due to feelings of inferiority, allow destructive things to grow unchecked through fear of taking a stand. Another person might erroneously nurture delusions of superiority and dream of finding satisfaction by having power over others, whereby any means is right, including torture, war, and different kinds of abuse. The first one expresses outrage at the second, and thus clearly lacks the neutrality to see the hypocrisy as well as specific causes and their effects. And this person also lacks the ability to distinguish between making things right and being angry. So when we see the outrages of war and such like, we are taught to even then refrain from hate thoughts and rage. But that does not prevent us from recognizing terrible wrongs and attempting to take logical action to address them. The state of neutrality then allows more logical, constructive choices to be made.
Desires and rage, like all forms of getting badly out of the control of the good human nature, are primal reasons for defeats. Thus, it is not the hot-headed ones who achieve a true victory, rather the level-headed and restrained, the quiet and calm, who do not let themselves be led by hate and revenge, or by ambition and greed for might, and so forth.
Begierde und Zorn nämlich, wie alle Formen der Ausartung, sind ursächliche Gründe für Niederlagen, so nicht der Hitzköpfige einen wahrlichen Sieg erringt, sondern der Nüchterne und Zurückhaltende, der Ruhige und Gleichmütige, der sich weder von Hass und Rache noch von Ehrgeiz und Machtgier und so weiter
leiten lässt.
Not being affected by emotional influences is not only neutral, but on page 16, Billy further explains that it is the true strategy of defense.
This form of defense leads to a superiority advantage Überlegenheit, which is unfathomable for the attackers, and is therefore not fightable and cannot be disabled, which is not only the case in the context of acts of war and acts of defense, but also in daily life, and the general and specific interpersonal relationships when any differences in attacks arise.
Diese Form der Verteidigung führt zu einer Überlegenheit, die für Angreifende unergründlich und daher nicht bekämpfbar und nicht ausschaltbar ist, was nicht nur in Bezug auf Kriegshandlungen und deren Verteidigungshandlungen der Fall ist, sondern auch im täglichen Leben und in den allgemeinen und besonderen zwischenmenschlichen Beziehungen, wenn irgendwelche Differenzen und Angriffe in Erscheinung treten.
The opponent not being able to fathom the neutral defense of the one concerned leaves him or her at a disadvantage.
And exactly that is a factor which is required in order to pacify the fellow human being or opponent, and to be able to teach him or her better, or for him or her to be victorious, when the applied unfathomable defense strategy brings him or her to rationality, and lets him or her recognize the effectivity of the whole thing.
Und genau das ist der Faktor, der erforderlich ist, um den Mitmenschen oder Gegner zu besänftigen und ihn eines Besseren belehren oder besiegen zu können, wenn ihn die angewandte unergründliche Verteidigungsstrategie zur Vernunft bringt und ihn die Effektivität des Ganzen erkennen lässt.
So neutrality is clearly not only about being fair in our freeness from prejudice and freeness from partisanship. It also has the practical value, as Billy explains, of providing us with an advantage if we are under attack, either in our personal lives or in the greater context of an unavoidable war. It also spares our psyche from fury, wrath, zeal, rage, and similar things, and allows us to see things with a degree of clarity and thus constructively move forward.
Vivienne Legge.